All right, Ben, should we talk about this Gaza deal?
Yeah, spoiler alert, we will not be fluffing like the entire American mainstream media has been.
No, we're going to try to stick to the facts. Okay, so let's talk about what was actually agreed to. So the 20 living Israeli hostages held by Hamas for over 2 years are now released. They are back in Israel. That is unequivocally a great thing for them, their families, really for everyone in Israel who's kind of been holding their breath since they were taken on October 7th. Israel has released 1,700 detainees that they picked up in Gaza and held without charges. I've seen a lot of Palestinian voices argue that those people should be called hostages too. I get where they're coming from. We also don't know all the specifics of all those cases. So I don't think we can adjudicate that here, but noted. And then Israeli human rights groups also note that like there's thousands more Gazans being held by Israel, often without trial, often in prisons where detainees have been allegedly tortured or killed or more. So just more context. But also as part of this deal, Israel released 250 Palestinians serving prison terms in Israel, including many individuals who have hurt or killed Israeli citizens. And just remember, the mastermind of the October 7th attacks, Yahya Sinwar, was released by Israel in a similar hostage deal back in 2011. So this is a big deal. It's politically explosive in Israel and was like a challenging pill for them to swallow. As part of the deal, 8 trucks are supposed to be surging into Gaza with at least 600 per day entering. But on Tuesday, Reuters reported that Israel is still restricting aid into Gaza to 300 trucks per day, half of what they agreed to in the deal, and is preventing border crossings from opening. Israel says those restrictions are in response to Hamas being slow in turning over the bodies of 24 dead Israeli hostages who are still in Gaza. We've talked about the challenges of finding those bodies and getting them back, but apparently that's leading to aid restrictions already. The Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, has pulled back to the mutually agreed upon lines in the deal. The BBC reported the IDF is still in control of about 53% of the Gaza Strip. That is a lot. The fighting is supposed to have stopped, but Palestinian news sources say that 6 people were killed in an IDF drone strike east of Gaza City on Tuesday. And the BBC reported that hospitals in Gaza say at least 7 people have been killed since the ceasefire went into effect. Hamas has reportedly deployed thousands of fighters to Gaza's urban areas to kind of reassert control. They've started fighting with other militia groups, including some backed by Israel. Hamas fighters publicly executed a bunch of guys in Gaza City on Monday. They filmed it and they disseminated that video of the execution to kind of remind everyone they're there, I guess. And then oddly, Ben, a couple of days ago, Trump told reporters on Air Force One that the U.S. had given Hamas some sort of tacit approval to kind of reassert authority and be in charge for a while in Gaza. Here are those comments.
Are standing because they do want to stop the problems, and they've been open about it, and we gave them approval for a period of time. You have to understand, they've lost probably 60,000 people. That's a lot of retribution. They've lost 60,000 people, and the ones that are living right now were, in many cases, very young when this all started. And we are having them watch that there's not going to be big crime or some of the problems that you have when you have areas like this that have been literally demolished.
Weird. And then Tuesday, though, Ben, Trump had this to say about Hamas disarming.
They're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They misrepresented because we were told they had 26, 24 of dead hostages, if we can use those terms. And it seems as though they don't have that because we're talking about a much lesser number. But that's a very tough subject. I want them back. You know, they did take out a couple of gangs that were very bad, very, very bad gangs, and they did take them out, and they killed a number of gang members. And that didn't bother me much, to be honest with you. But we have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Okay, so again, it's worth noting that the gang members Trump is cool with being dead or killed by Hamas were armed and backed by the Israelis. So Ben, we'll get into the reconstruction talks in Egypt in a second, but like any initial thoughts from you on the deal, the kind of level of concern about this ceasefire holding, given the kind of chipping away we're seeing here, and these confusing answers from Trump about what Hamas is allowed to do.
Yeah, I share your, relief. I guess I don't want to say joy. I mean, let me just say that part of, I guess, my meta concern about this whole last couple of days is there was this outpouring of adulation for Trump and all these guys, largely guys, many of them creepy, meeting at a peace summit. At least 60,000, probably over 100,000 Palestinians are dead. More Israeli hostages are dead than needed to die.
Yeah.
This is an important point I haven't seen made enough. I mean, if this deal, which is essentially the same deal that's been on the table for a very long time, had been reached earlier, we would have had more hostages back. And so it's not, yes, it's joyful for those hostages and their families to be reunited, for the Palestinians who are being reunited with people who have been released from prison. It's joyful that aid's getting, but this didn't need to happen. All this death and destruction, I don't think was necessary for Israel's security concerns, and certainly for the Palestinian people. So that's kind of my, it's important to note that this is a huge, positive step forward relative to where we were. But I think we also have to measure it against the fact that this didn't need to happen in the first place. And that's kind of a general discomfort I had with the kind of adulation that we've been experiencing in the coverage of this the last couple of days.
Yeah, now, it's not joy, it's like relief, right?
Yeah, it's relief is the word I felt more.
2 years
thank God, aid's getting, thank God these hostages are going home. And look, I think that the two biggest sticking points remain, and they were prominently featured in your windup there, which is number one, what happens to Hamas? Are they going to truly demilitarize? And frankly, and Trump, in a weird way, addressed complexity in his simple way. If Hamas just absented Gaza tomorrow, there actually is then therefore no authority, and then the armed people are either Palestinian Islamic Jihad, other militant groups like that, or it's, weird gangs created and armed by Israel. And that's not exactly a recipe for security. So there's this question about just what is the future of Hamas? And then there's the question of who's going to run Gaza and what is the Israeli government and Israeli military's intention there? Are they going to kind of resume some form of military operation once now the hostages are home? Are they going to permit aid to actually get in? Are they, importantly, going to permit international journalists to get in to see what happened there? And we still know as little about that today as we did last week when we were talking about this too. And so, again, I have that relief combined with some discomfort with the way in which this whole thing is being received, which we can unpack, plus a lot of questions about how do we get over the main hurdles of essentially who's going to run Gaza.
Yeah. And remember, Netanyahu kept telling us the war can't end until Hamas is disarmed and basically eradicated and not in control.
Destroyed, yeah.
Well, Hamas is still there. They haven't disarmed. I mean, I keep seeing reports that Hamas has agreed to give up their larger weapons like rockets, but not small arms, in part because they're battling with these militia groups. I don't know. It seems like a big problem. And also, we're going to get into the reconstruction issues in a minute, but a key part of that 20-point plan that Trump laid out was this international kind of temporary peacekeeping force, often sourced from Muslim or Arab countries. These countries will never sign up to send in troops as peacekeepers if they are doing day-to-day fighting with Hamas, if Hamas is not disarmed. That is going to be a non-starter for these countries to wage war with Hamas. How is this going to work if Hamas is not disarmed and if they're just sort of still there and they're still, not only are they deploying fighters to the streets, they're also deploying its members to clear rubble and try to build and fix basic infrastructure. So they're kind of reasserting control in civilian affairs too.
Yeah, when Trump says we will disarm them if they don't disarm, I have a lot of questions about who the we is.
Yeah,
is
him
the we
and Jared, or
certainly not him and Jared. Is the we the U.S. military? Because I literally cannot imagine a scenario, but it's Trump, so who knows? Everything's possible. But a scenario in which the U.S. military is in Gaza, fighting Hamas, that would be
that'd be bad,
beyond unprecedented, and not good. Then is the we therefore this kind of group of countries that was meeting in Egypt? Because, I do think the one way this would happen, because people can say, well, then what's your answer? I think it is if the Arab countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, probably Turkey as well, some collection of those types of countries. Some of them are contributing significant amounts of money because they have significant amounts of money. And then some of them are contributing troops or peacekeeping force that could go in with an agreement with Hamas. I mean, this is the important thing, that essentially they would have to negotiate. I don't think that, to your point, they wouldn't want to go in and like fight Hamas,
right.
But particularly countries like Turkey and Qatar that have, a lot of juice with Hamas, like could there be some way in which you essentially negotiate an Arab peacekeeping force taking the place of Hamas and kind of midwifing the emergence of a new Palestinian leadership? That is only possible if not only does Hamas agree to it, but if the IDF is not in Gaza,
right?
Because similarly, those countries aren't going to go in and fight the IDF,
or be at risk of an airstrike,
or be at risk exactly So that to me is the huge gap here. You kind of know what the only option is to an alternative Palestinian leadership that can govern Hamas, and so that gets to the Israeli political wills. Do they actually want that to happen, or do they essentially want this brief experiment to fail so they have a pretext to kind of resume control of Gaza? And the fact that they're still in like 50% of the Gaza Strip, just sitting there taking shots at things, while some of the right-wing ministers in the Netanyahu government are kind of beginning to say, we're never going to get past this phase, suggests that perhaps, we still don't know whether the Israeli intention is to try to allow that success to happen or whether they're going to want to resume some form of direct control, if not resumption of ethnic cleansing in Gaza.
Yeah, and like Israel Katz, the defense minister, a couple of days ago was saying they need to take out all the rest of the tunnels in Gaza City. It's like that's
years.
That's
just, yeah.
Okay, so there's a ton of unanswered questions about Gaza's future. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of them. Who will govern it? Will Hamas disarm? What role, if any, will the Palestinian Authority play in governance? Who will provide security in the near term? Who will organize and fund that reconstruction effort? Like a couple of details. The summit of world leaders in Egypt Monday was supposed to begin to answer some of those questions, but it seems to have been more of a press event and more of just like a part two of the victory lap for Trump than a substantive meeting. So Trump was hours late because his previous events in Israel ran long. And I don't know if you saw this, but he actually was complaining about it during his speech to the Knesset, like bitching at Bibi, pointing to Sarah Netanyahu, being like, you talk for a while too. It was kind of funny. But when Trump finally got to Egypt.
But to be clear, he kept like all these world leaders waiting for, I think, for like 6 hours.
Just sitting on their asses. Yeah. And then when he finally got there, like he gave a speech, he took some pictures. The Economist story said he gave them like 5 minutes of time to talk. And then he signed this document and they left. Like that was it. Here's a bit of sound. He also had some bilateral meetings. Here's some sound from his time in Egypt.
This is clearly, in my mind, I think in the mind of everyone in this room, probably one of the most important days for world peace in 50 years. And that's not an exaggeration.
Only 50?
Maybe 100.
I don't know what it is. I like the tough people better than I like the soft, easy ones. I don't know what the hell that is. It's a personality problem, I suspect. We have Hungary. Oh, Victor. Where is Victor? Victor. We love Victor. Vietor, I call him.
Talking to me.
Put the little accent on it. You are fantastic, all right? I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but I'm the only one that matters. I'm not allowed to say it because usually it's the end of your political career if you say it. She's a beautiful young woman. Where is she? There she is. You don't mind being called beautiful, right?
It's Georgia Maloney.
Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. Everybody's going to join the Abraham Accord. I like to say the Avraham. I love Avraham.
Okay, so that was that. The Wall Street Journal.
That's peace. That's what peace sounds like.
That was something. The Wall Street Journal got a hold of the document that they all signed. It was a bunch of like kind of gauzy, vague language, stuff like, quote, we seek tolerance, dignity, and equal opportunity for every person, ensuring this region is a place where all can pursue their aspirations in peace, security, and economic prosperity. We pledge to work collectively to implement and maintain this legacy, building inspirational foundations upon which future generations may thrive together in peace. Hopefully there were more like kind of substantive working level meetings happening that got into the details, Ben, but we don't know. So look, the summit came together quickly, right? It would be unfair of us, I think, to suggest that these guys need to like hammer it all out in a day. But at the same time, like you got all these heads of state in one place. That's a big deal. And you have all this momentum from getting this agreement. Like you really want to use that meeting to get some commitments or make some progress or like get people to like publicly sign up for stuff. And it's just not clear that they did that. And I think like that speaks to what you were saying earlier, Ben, which is my biggest fear in this whole thing is that Trump primarily only cared about getting the hostages home and how he's viewed in Israel, and that he will get distracted and he will kind of just turn a blind eye to what's happening in Gaza if the reconstruction doesn't happen or if the airstrikes continue. And if Netanyahu just breaks this ceasefire deal like he does most deals.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I'm actually not opposed to the idea of getting a bunch of world leaders together to try to signal, the importance of this, to try to create a sense of inevitability around it, right?
Oh yeah, it's smart.
I actually thought okay, that's smart. But the problem is that's not what this felt like. This felt like a big commercial for Trump. I mean, if he achieved something, and we've said he achieved something that Joe Biden couldn't achieve, which he squeezed Netanyahu enough to get this ceasefire across the line. And I think Qatar and Turkey squeezed Hamas enough to get them there. Now, first of all, to the Rubio point, though, the biggest day for world peace, this is, as with the Abraham Accords. This is part of what was so frustrating to me, is that the Abraham Accords was similarly framed as a peace deal.
Yeah.
And look what happened. October 7th happened. October 7th happened in part because Hamas felt like the Abraham Accords was cutting them out of the process, right? Precisely because the Abraham Accords wasn't a peace deal, we had a much bigger war in Gaza. And I feel like we're seeing a repeat of this movie. We don't know the future of the West Bank. We don't know the future of Gaza. We don't know the future of the existence of the Palestinian people. And to get a bunch of world leaders together who primarily, and let's be clear, all of them failed. Everyone on that tableau in different ways failed, or else this wouldn't have happened in the last 2 years. And to get them together, they looked relieved that maybe they'll have a little less pressure back home. Mm-hmm. Maybe I won't have protests. Maybe I won't have my kid ask me why I won't call this a genocide. And by the way, some of the same media outlets feel the same way. Maybe, this is good. We don't have to look at this anymore. But just because you don't have to look at it doesn't mean that Gaza is still not destroyed. Doesn't mean that the West Bank is still potentially going to be annexed, right? And so I felt like some of Trump's, again, so people don't just think I'm trying to hate on Trump here. Some of these instincts are not bad instincts. Get everybody together. Make everybody accountable to be in Egypt and try to get some momentum behind the ceasefire. But the point is, it's a ceasefire. You're trying to get momentum so that a ceasefire can over time become a peace agreement. And treating the ceasefire itself as this world historic achievement, not only does it put the cart before the horse, it diminishes the amount of work that has to be done to make this thing a reality.
Yeah, they're just spiking the football on the 50-yard line. There's a lot more to do. I want to get to the backstory, kind of the credit issues and what's going forward in a second. Just one quick aside before we leave Egypt. So Trump was busy in Egypt. He just did a couple events and he talked everywhere. But it was good to see he also carved out some time for himself, a little me time, a little self-care, a little corruption time. Because while he was in Egypt, a hot mic caught Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto asking Trump for a favor. And so the audio was crappy, so we couldn't play it for you guys. But what reporters could make out from the conversation was it went something like this. So Subianto refers to the region being, quote, not safe security-wise. And then he says, Can I meet Eric? And Trump says, I'll have Eric call you. Should I do that? Subianto, yeah. Trump, he's such a good boy. I'll have Eric call. A moment later, Subianto says, Eric or Don Jr.? Trump, I'll have one of them call you. The Guardian pointed out in its reporting that Trump's company opened its first golf resort in Indonesia in March. And the Trump Org's website says another property in Indonesia and a resort in Bali are coming soon. So it's good to see that the firewall between official and personal business is holding up. And this is on the stage.
And this is a really important point because essentially, at a peace summit, they're probably having under the table conversations about essentially the development of more Trump properties in Indonesia, which, by the way, is how a lot of business gets done in Indonesia, which has huge corruption problems. There's protests across the country in part because of the corruption problems from Gen Z. And this is the last thing I want to say before we leave Egypt. Another thing that caught my eye, Tommy, is there were these gigantic, when the Trump motorcade was rolling down the street towards the Sharm el-Sheikh peace venue, there were these huge billboards with a picture of Trump and Sisi, the president of Egypt, and, kind of superimposed over flags, and then under the banner, "Together in Peace." And I think in our dystopian reality, it's worth pausing on the fact that Sisi presides over a military dictatorship where there's something like 60,000 political prisoners who are regularly tortured. People disappear in prisons. Trump wants to deploy the troops in the streets of this country.
Which Sisi did. He rolled tanks into Tahrir Square.
Yes. Even in the back end of this ceasefire agreement, Israel's still got the Palestinians living under permanent occupation. And what worries me is the definition of peace at the peace summit is literally like those autocrats controlling our lives with military in the streets and some corrupt deals about golf courses. Like that essentially that's what peace is. It's not like the Palestinians actually achieving self-determination and a better life. And it's not even like the rest of us living without, being under the shadow of this kind of creeping dictatorial tendencies around the world.
Yeah. Did you catch Trump like praising Sisi for his like tough on crime approach?
Yeah.
Being like, oh, there's no crime in Egypt, which first of all, what are you talking about? Second of all, I mean, we know he thinks extrajudicial killings are okay when it comes to boats off the coast of Venezuela, but maybe coming to a city near you. But so to the backstory. So let's talk about what we know of this backstory. I'll try to do a little TikTok and kind of like, then we could suss out the credit. So we covered the initial Trump 20-point peace plan when he laid it out a few weeks back. I think both of us were quite skeptical that they would get through all of it, and they have not done that yet. But basically, Trump kind of brought this plan to Netanyahu. He let him shape it behind the scenes before it was public, make it more advantageous to Israel, and then ultimately, though, pushed Netanyahu really hard to say yes, and then just kind of ignored when Netanyahu was kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth back in Israel and shitting on the plan and suggesting he'd never go through with it. That is the kind of pressure I think both of us always hoped that Biden would put on Netanyahu. Yeah. Like in fairness, right? Like Trump was helped by the fact that it had been 2 years. He was helped by the fact that Netanyahu made this colossal mistake of firing missiles into Doha last month. And by Netanyahu ultimately knowing that he had lost the Democratic Party, and if Trump cuts him loose, he has nowhere to go politically in the United States. So there is context here. But regardless, Trump used his leverage, and that was critical. And then a couple days later, Hamas responds with this partial yes to the Trump plan. They're like, okay, we're good with the hostage release. We're good with transferring governance to technocrats. They ignore the rest. They're like, we can talk about all the rest. This is the moment where I think Trump had some political genius or just the narcissism, because he didn't call Netanyahu and say, what do you think? He didn't say, let's sync up, let's coordinate with Ron Dermer and get our teams together.
It sent Tony Blinken out for some consultations in the region.
He was just like, fuck it. We got a deal, huge win, Truth Social, historic moment. Like, this is incredible. And that forced Netanyahu into these negotiations last week in Egypt, where, as you mentioned earlier, the Wall Street Journal had some great reporting about how Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt push Hamas really, really hard to take the deal. Apparently, the message was like, say yes to this deal, or no more diplomatic cover from us, no more political office in our capitals, no more us fighting for you to be part of Gaza's future. And then Trump, again, in a move I think he deserves credit for, allowed Steve Witkoff, his golf buddy turned emissary, and Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, to speak directly with Hamas to reassure them that Trump would force Netanyahu to go through with the terms of the deal. They were concerned that if they gave up the hostages, they give up their leverage. I know that sounds gross, but that's what they were thinking. And this reassurance from Witkoff and Jared directly apparently helped get the deal done. And that, speaking directly to Hamas goes against traditional U.S. policy. We usually talk through intermediaries for rules that are stupid. But if a Democrat had done that, like if Joe Biden had told Jake Sullivan to speak directly with Hamas, Lindsey Graham would light himself on fire in front of the White House.
Or Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
That's actually the closer analogy.
That could have made it happen.
Yeah.
Being like the stockades in front of the White House right now. But so obviously it was the right move to do that because it helped get the deal done. So big picture, Ben, like I think Trump gets a ton of credit for like getting the ceasefire deal done. Like you said earlier, I think he could have done it a long time ago, right? Between January of this year and March, whenever the ceasefire ended, they were supposed to be negotiating phase 2 of the ceasefire and an end to the war. If we pressured Netanyahu then, I think they could have gotten this deal done. And then, like, just as a bit of a sidebar, there's all this sort of chatter and commentary, like keep seeing Politico Playbook being like, and imagine if he hadn't bombed Iran, this never would have happened.
God.
It's there just couldn't be more unrelated issues.
That. Yes.
And then finally, like, I give Trump credit where credit is due. I'm so happy this happened. It's not a Middle East peace deal. And like the reporting shorthand that's kind of taking that line, it's just you look ridiculous.
And you're misinforming your public.
Right.
I mean, most Americans would wake up and literally think that there's a Middle East peace because that's what's been regurgitated to them by what is literally almost functioning like appliance state media. And it's not just Fox News. It's everybody.
No, it's everybody. They're like, we owe them one on this one.
We owe them one. Let's give them this one, right? And yeah, I mean, look, Trump deserves credit for squeezing Bibi, which I think he did probably pretty hard. Like, we probably didn't even see this stuff in private. It seems like he was fed up with this.
Yeah, the humiliation ritual of calling the Qataris and saying sorry, like that was a nice touch.
He did. Now, you make an important point, which is from March, when the last ceasefire, because there was a ceasefire, broke down, to now, I don't think Israel accomplished a single legitimate military objective. Right. I mean, they had already taken out Sinwar. Like all they were doing is moving more people around Gaza, bombing more people indiscriminately, starving more people. And so I do think that's important because there wasn't the follow through done on the first ceasefire. We had kind of a pointless several months when, by the way, the Israelis seemed to feel like they had a blank check because of the Gaza Riviera stuff. So this is a more complicated record. But at the end, Trump did squeeze Bibi. I agree he was smart about kind of grabbing the Hamas, yes, when he could, which is something Biden would never do. I think this Iran narrative, which is important because you hear it constantly now. I think what's happening there is the kind of more hawkish or kind of pro-Israel parts of the Trump orbit and Republican Party, which, by the way, doesn't seem to include Trump, don't want to say that this is because he squeezed Bibi. Mm-hmm. And so they've kind of seized on this narrative that like, well, because he bombed Iran like several months ago, that got us to the ceasefire, made Hamas say, we give up. Like that couldn't be a crazier, less counterfactual narrative.
Right.
And to see like American reporters like credulously repeating it over and over again is absurd to me. And if anything, what the Iran thing points to is, again, the lack of durability when you don't have a real peace agreement, because we don't even know what's going on with the Iranian nuclear program right now. But it seemed like an effort to kind of impose a kind of hawkish pro-Israel narrative on the reality, which is that Trump actually just squeezed Bibi into this ceasefire.
Yeah, and so the built-out narrative about this you hear is like, oh, they've decimated Hezbollah and reduced that risk. Assad is now gone. The Iranian nuclear program is rolled back by Midnight Hammer. Okay, all true. But that did not change the security risk to Israel from Hamas,
yes.
Right? It might have created political space for Netanyahu in Israel, but he still didn't want to take the deal. Like what changed things was the political pressure.
Most of those things happened before March, right? I mean, Operation Midnight Hammer or whatever was after. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the thing that changed here is that Trump was like, we've had enough of this. I'm gonna squeeze Bibi, maybe because I won a Nobel Peace Prize, whatever the instinct is here. I do think that there's another important point here, which is that you mentioned the kind of asymmetry of political space, right? A Democratic president would feel like they couldn't necessarily engage Hamas directly or couldn't squeeze Bibi in that way. By the way, that may be true, that the Republican Party would make a lot more noise and make that a lot more difficult, and the Democrats are more inclined to kind of defer to a president on this kind of stuff. But that still doesn't excuse it.
I agree.
I think the lesson for Democrats should be, we can talk to Hamas if we think it's the right thing to do. We can squeeze Israel. Like, just because there's an asymmetry, we kind of psychologically allow the asymmetry to exist by being so defensive. So part of what Trump is doing that I think is useful is kind of blowing through all these, weird kind of hawkish national security establishment / media establishment guardrails around what you're allowed to do.
Yeah. He invited the Taliban to Camp David, for God's sake.
Not saying I would have done that, but hey, there's another example.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do want to know, Ben, and hopefully there'll be some more reporting on this, is like, I want to know if there are any secret deals between Trump and Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey to get them to pressure Hamas. Like, we probably know the Qatar one because Trump tweeted that they got an Article 5 security commitment from the United States, and we all assumed it was.
And Hegseth announced, coincidentally, in between the announcement of the deal and the Egypt summit, he announced some Qatar airbase in the United States.
That was so
which
strange.
Was kind of strange.
And then walked it back right away. Bizarre. But I wonder if, like Turkey, Egypt, they are friends, but they have at times been frenemies.
Yes.
They have grave human rights violations. There's some question about whether they might get more advanced military hardware or God knows what out of the deal, maybe like F-35s or who knows. But watch that space, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I had one theory, which is also that the Turkey and Qatar care a lot about Syria. And Israel was really going after Syria. They were bombing them regularly. They were threatening to annex southern Syria. And right around that Trump-Netanyahu summit, you saw that kind of begin to dissipate and back off a little bit. So I almost wonder whether there was some kind of trade-off where, okay, we're going to lean on Bibi to stay out of Syria if you'll lean on Hamas. I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating here. But there is clearly stuff under the table. And if you think that that is fanciful, just remember that it came out after the Abraham Accords. All of the things that the United States gave away to get the Abraham Accords.
Big arms sale.
We gave away Western Sahara, a piece of territory to Morocco, arms sales, all these different things. So I do think in this kind of transactional approach to things, the U.S. was probably spreading a bunch of goodies around the region to get that photo op in Egypt.
Yeah, we'll learn what that is someday. Okay, so during Trump's speech to the Knesset, he gave Steve Witkoff a shout out, and then just to troll us, I think he gave Jared Kushner a bunch of love as well. Let's listen to a clip of that.
Steve was chosen by me. He never did this before, but he had tremendous negotiating skills. But I know a lot of people that negotiate pretty well, although it is an art. But most importantly with Steve, he's just a great guy. Everybody loved him. And then we called in Jared. We need that brain on occasion. We got to get Jared in here. We got to get a certain group of people. But Steve started this all by himself. I call him Henry Kissinger, who doesn't leak.
Okay.
I just want to say that, I'm on a spiritual journey here, Tommy. I'm trying to get to a good place, but if I don't and I end up in hell, they're going to be basically playing that clip on a loop for me.
All day long.
All day long.
All day long. So, look, the Witkoff piece, Witkoff's been working this account since, before Trump took office. Obviously, he gets some credit for the outcome. The Kushner role, to me, is just, look, I'm trying to be objective. It seems a lot thinner. And, the brazen spinning to get him credit is a little gross. I don't think this deal got done because these guys formulated the perfect plan and picked the lock with it. No, the gist of the ceasefire, as you said, had been kind of out there for a long time, been on the table for a while. Nor do I think Jared swept in and leveraged his relationships with the Qataris to work some. No, it's Trump forced Netanyahu to take the deal. Yes, Witkoff and Kushner, I guess them going to the final days of the talks in Egypt signaled that Trump cared a lot, but that could have been Rubio or any government employee. And the upside of using Rubio in that case is you're not worried about whether Jared has a conflict of interest because he's sitting on billions of dollars from the people that he is then negotiating with.
Yeah. I mean, we've said many times that it seems like Trump squeezed Bibi. That's great. It also is the case that Israel was becoming an almost unsustainable pariah state. And the Europeans were starting to really break hard away from them. There were reasons why Bibi might have felt like he had to bend at this point in a way that he didn't feel 6 months ago or a year ago. And so to credit the kind of negotiating genius of Witkoff or Jared Kushner, when the terms of this thing have always been pretty clear. You know, like we said a million times, this is the same kind of fucking ceasefire that we were hoping would be reached, less than a year into this war after October 7th. And so I just, if people are listening to us and thinking, oh man, look, these guys don't give Trump credit or these guys are pissed about the media coverage. No, the reason we're doing this is because I honestly think it's an important function of this podcast as we continue to descend further and further into a kind of an authoritarian reality in which what we're learning is that everybody from media outlets to whomever seems to be more inclined to capitulate. I don't know. I think some of those journalists, as I mentioned, not only is it let's give Trump this win, it's Jared's probably a pretty good source, so let's just throw this Trump. The reason we do this is because we want you to know, listener, that you're not crazy. because I don't know. It was easy to think for more than a couple of minutes the other day, am I crazy? This seems way over the top for a ceasefire that is belated, that could have been in place in March, that was in place in March. And so, yeah, I think we have to to look under the hood of this stuff. I guess if I give Witkoff credit for anything, that guy will show up anywhere at any time.
Yeah.
Which again, this is the thing I like about if there's one thing, Trump, he will show up the next day in another country.
Yep.
He'll send somebody anywhere to talk to anybody. I like that. So let's be very clear. I do like that. But I just don't think that this was like some ingenious formulation that was arrived at. Anybody who's looked at this problem since October 7th had pretty much the outlines of the exact same deal. And if anything, by the way, from everything I hear, feels like the Qataris were the ones that built that formulation.
Yep.
So if anything, Witkoff and Kushner were literally just coming in behind what was probably a Doha-produced ceasefire.
And the Qataris helped pressure Hamas to get it over the finish line just a month after they'd been bombed. So big shout out to them for sticking with it.
Now, what Trump is revealing, though, by the way, is that the United States, if it throws its weight around, none of these leaders are willing to, they all fall in line. Yeah. I mean, Keir Starmer looked like a busboy, like waiting to be complimented by Trump in that photo line.
He got like sort of summoned up and then dismissed.
And instead of that,
seconds.
he's like, Vitor.
Loves his autocrats. You just watched an excerpt from Pod Save the World, the show I do every week with Ben Rhodes, where we talk about the biggest issues in national security and foreign policy. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Pod Save the World here on YouTube. And also, please subscribe to Pod Save America on YouTube. As you guys know, when you search for political news on YouTube, you get lots of right-wing crap. You get TPUSA, The Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro. And that is bad because when normal people are just searching for news, that's what they find. When you subscribe to Pod Save America, you help us get good, factual, progressive information into the algorithm and just educate people. So help, please, subscribe. Also, it's free.